I'm very excited to get a chance to moderate this panel. And I'm lucky enough to sit on the board of the X Prize, where we have some very interesting ways of using gamification to solve some of the world's biggest problems. And in this industry, that would be a $100 million prize that we have for carbon renewal. So this is a passion of mine, and I'm thrilled to have these lovely panelists here to join me to speak about their endeavors and what they are doing in this space. So with me, we have Roger Martella, who's the Chief Corporate Officer of GE Vernova, Clay Gaspar, the President and Chief Executive Officer of Devon Energy, Kara Mangone, who is the Head of Sustainable Finance Group for Goldman Sachs, as well as Fahad Dhubaib, who's the Senior Vice President for Strategy and Market Analysis for Aramco. Thank you guys all for being here. So I want to dive right in because we're going to talk about net zero to net growth, which is going to be a very interesting topic of conversation. It seems to change every year what the definition of those things are. So I think, Roger, I will start with you. As the Chief Corporate Officer of GE Vernova, we are seeing a very interesting new generation of energy leadership taking the stage right now. So can you share with us what shifts you're seeing in global policies and markets as we navigate the start of this new era?
Well, thank you very much for the question, and thank you for including us, and congratulations to the Atlantic Council for such a successful event here in your hometown in Washington, D.C. You mentioned the word era, and I think era is the way to say it, this new era. So GE Vernova is a 135-year-old company founded by Thomas Edison, who started the electrification revolution. So we've kind of seen it all after 135 years. We help produce 25% of the world's energy with our equipment. We're the only U.S. headquartered company that manufactures the full suite of energy technologies. It's about a third of the world's energy ex-China. But even with that legacy, what's happening around the world as a company that's in 100 countries is very much unprecedented for our lifetimes, for our careers. We go back to World War II was the last time we've seen this much demand for electricity. And there's different reasons for that. This is Atlantic Council environment. You probably don't need to hear from me, but whether that's energy security in the European Union, if you look at the president's recent trip to the Middle East, Saudi Arabia, UAE, leading on nuclear, leading on innovation, Vision 2030 by Saudi, trying to incorporate more renewables, the Asia's emphasis on becoming leaders in innovation, an innovation pipeline, or the U.S., which has put, under President Trump, energy security, energy issues front and center of his economic policy. These are trends we're seeing all around the world. 25% of the world's population went to the polls last year, and everybody who was elected on a platform of economic development. And electricity is prosperity. Electricity is core to that. So every conversation we're having is these governments are putting electricity front and center in their economic development policies, in front of their domestic policies and geopolitical policies. So we're in the middle of those conversations. And just this morning at 9:30 a.m., to hit the point, I think in connection with the Atlantic Council, we announced 3 goals on how we're going to be responsible in delivering on that. First, we announced that by 2030, we want to contribute another 150 gigawatts of capacity onto the grid to help meet the world's demands for growing electrification. So that's what we're going to work to do between now and 2030, 150 gigawatts of capacity. But it also matters where we build that capacity. We don't want to just pick up the phone in the order in which it rings. So we've also made an ambition that of the capacity we put on the grid, at least 30% of it should be in emerging and developing countries. So making sure we're helping serve people who are underserved by access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable electricity. So we have the capacity, we have the communities we're trying to serve, but it's also how do you train the people who are going to be part of this era, this electrification supercycle. So we've also made a commitment for workforce development to reach out to 30,000 students between now and 2030 so we can create the pipeline of future leaders. That's the part we're going to play. I imagine everybody here has a role in that so that we can deliver on those things. So that's how we're looking at the world globally, the commitments we have to come up and serve, and the diverse pipelines of technologies we want to bring to the table.
Thank you. I love those goals, and I hope that all of us can be part of helping you manifest them. So appreciate that. Fahad, I'm going to jump to you over there. So we're seeing a very interesting new phase of global energy systems emerge right now. And many countries are taking very different approaches to their energy security and economic competitiveness, and also their sustainability priorities. So I'd like to ask you, what core principles guide Saudi Aramco's ability to stay the course and what is that course?
Well, thank you very much for having us on this panel, and I'd like to congratulate the Atlantic Council for a successful event. A lot of people think of Aramco as an oil company. In reality, we're in all forms of energy. We're in oil, we're in gas, we're in refining, petrochemicals, CCS, hydrogen, and renewables as well. And we're also a technology and a digital company at the same time. And probably I'll talk about the last two later on. But in reality, I think what has served us very well is we have always been pragmatic in our approach. We move at the speed of economics and science. We look at technology, we look at affordability. Even when we pursue some strategic sectors, we take a gated approach to it. And we feel that this has helped Aramco very well navigate the ups and the downs of the industry, whether it's the shift of the pendulum too far on the sustainability front, away from affordability and reliability, or back into any of these triangles of the angle. For us, the future looks at expanding our gas further. By 2030, we would have expanded our gas by 30%. We're building, in addition to our 11 gigawatt conventional power, around 14 gigawatts of renewables. We're developing CCS and hydrogen. Of course, hydrogen, we were hopeful for the demand to materialize, but given the lack of offtake, we elected to wait and see and take an approach along with the customers who will be lifting. We're shifting around 4 million barrels of our oil production into chemicals. We're upgrading our refining as well. And we're also piloting some e-fuels and direct air capture with many of our partners. And this has helped us and positioned us very well to stay the course on our net zero ambition by 2050. We have always been talking about the reality while being ambitious. A good example is hydrogen. When everyone was interested in hydrogen, we pursued some engineering, and we didn't go beyond that until the offtake materialized. I think we were very prudent in our approach. We always combine facts, economics, and science in pursuing strategic sectors, while growing to meet the demand by our customers. Our obsession is two things. Number one, how do we continuously meet the upside in energy demand in all of its forms? And number two, how do we decarbonize the current energy system? I'm proud to say that we have among the lowest upstream carbon and methane intensity, and this will definitely position us very well to meet the demand by some of the customers who want a differentiated product, whether it's oil and gas.
Thank you very much. Kara, I'm going to jump to you. As the Global Financial Institution panelist here, you have a very unique perspective into business activity across sectors of the economy. So I'd like to ask you, what are your observations on how capital flows into energy decarbonization solutions, and how has that evolved in recent years?
Thanks, Lauren, and it's great to be here. It really is such a privilege to be part of such an important conversation on energy security, affordability, decarbonization, all topics we spend a lot of time on at Goldman Sachs. I'll start by saying, talking about business activity in this environment right now, I think you have to start with this connection between what's happening in the technology sector and what's happening in terms of energy demand and power. And there's been so much discussion on this today. I'll just focus specifically on global power center demand globally, which we see increasing 160% by the end of the decade. That's equivalent to a top 10 power consuming country. And so you can imagine capital flows with our clients are very focused on how we can help facilitate that growth. If you look at the utilities sector alone, we've seen CapEx double over the course of the past decade. So it's very significant growth, and that's where we're spending a significant amount of time across all energy sources, right? To meet this level of demand growth, as Fahad said, for their business, we're seeing very similar types of discussions with our clients across both traditional fossil fuels, renewable energy sources, and low carbon areas like nuclear, for example. In terms of where we've seen evolution, I would say on the decarbonization side, where I spend a tremendous amount of time with clients, either corporate clients who have decarbonization strategies or sustainability goals, or on the investor side, right, where in our business we help raise funds or deploy capital, invest on behalf of our clients and things like our alternatives business. There really is a significant range in client preferences on this topic. I do think we've also seen an evolution over time. So I would describe the kind of early days of climate exposure, climate-focused investing, or decarbonization-focused investing, to be a bit more focused on public sustainability commitments and really tracking emissions profiles. So especially in the public markets context, you tended to see a lot of over-underweighting based on emissions factors. Fast forward to today, and there is a very, very heavy focus on, if you want exposure, again, to climate, that's a focus of yours in decarbonization. There tends to be a very heavy focus on track record and financial performance. And what we see are investors asking questions like, which companies that I can hold are focused on decarbonization and getting their emissions profile over time, but are also poised for growth, either because they're able to increase operating efficiency in their operations, manage risk, or they're poised to meet a growing area of demand. So that's something that we see. We have seen quite an evolution. On the corporate side, I think similarly, they're asking similar questions, which is, where is the area of opportunity here? And if I have a public goal that's not linked to an area of opportunity or growth, I'm less focused on that. So I think that's been a big evolution. I'll just give one very good example of this is the hyperscalers, right? The hyperscalers want very fast deployment of energy, zero intermittency, and in general, low or zero carbon, if possible. And so I think we're spending a lot of time on answering what can often be a very hard question, and then looking at financing opportunities on the back of that.
I was going to give you a quick follow-up question, which is sort of, which themes would you say are the most active for your clients, and what are the challenges that you see in them hitting those interests?
So I would say a couple just really quick ones. I mean, certainly, as I was getting to on the hyperscaler point, I mean, we see nuclear as a significant opportunity. We were part of a group of large financial institutions and banks at the end of last year who expressed a commitment to help finance a tripling of nuclear capacity by 2050. We do see this as a really compelling part of the solution, so that's certainly an area. One of the earlier panels talked a lot about just implementation and execution and grid, and that's another area where we spend time is grid infrastructure. There are ways that we can de-risk those kinds of investments. Obviously, policy plays a really important role. And then the third area I'd point to is battery storage. I mean, if you look at the scale up of renewables, which we are continuing to see in the market, you really, when you have this innovative technology like generative AI, there really is zero tolerance for the intermittency component. So battery storage tends to become a very important part of that equation.
It's a very big scope you have to wander through. I like it. Clay, my friend over there, I've been waiting to hear you speak, and I have some questions for you.
I have some answers for you.
Great, I'm ready. As we navigate a very competitive priority area around energy and security and energy management and economic growth, I would like to know what energy pragmatism means to you in this new era, as we talked about era, and what roles do technology and innovation play in that?
Well, first of all, energy pragmatism and those two words being used in the same sentence just warms my heart as somebody who's dedicated his professional life to energy and the production of energy. I think this newfound focus on reliability, affordability, and we have to do it exceptionally well. I think that is, one, not just the right order, but I think all three are fundamentally important. I think when we were maybe a little complacent with abundant, very cheap energy, I think we kind of lost our way a little bit on the importance of that reliability aspect of it. So we play a significant role in that. We produce just under 1 million barrels of oil equivalent at Devon Energy. We're domestically focused. We've taken our environmental responsibilities very consistently and very pragmatically control the controllables kind of an approach. But we also believe that, look, all forms of energy are incredibly important. 25 years ago, of the world's energy source, about 58% was oil and gas. After 25 years and trillions of dollars investment and transition, today it's about 56% of the world's energy is oil and gas. But that's a 45% increase from 25 years ago. As we extrapolate that forward, we know all forms of energy are incredibly important, and we need to think a little bit more globally. We need to think a little bit more fungibly about energy. When we produce energy from one source, that frees up other sources from the need to being able to fill those gaps. Sometimes energy is very transportation intensive. Sometimes it's available in one area or another. So I think thinking globally, thinking fungibly about energy overall, I think is the right approach, and we're happy to play a significant role in that.
That's great, thank you. So Fahad, Aramco is really on the forefront of some very interesting innovations in technology, so I'd like to know, do you believe that there is a world where we can balance net growth and net zero strategies, and what role does technology play in doing that?
I'd like to talk about two of our companies. One is the VC fund, Aramco Ventures. It's a $7 billion venture capital fund, and the other is Aramco Digital. At Aramco Venture, we have been not only investing in promising technologies for the energy system, but we're also looking at disruptive technologies elsewhere. We have an investment philosophy that believes that innovation is at the periphery of different disciplines. I'll give you an example of two companies that we're working with. One that has an AI platform for drug discovery. We're using their AI platform to develop materials for our direct air capture, MOFs, to give you an example. That's a healthcare company that's helping an energy company develop materials that can help us with direct capture. The other company is also a healthcare company that has some advanced, non-invasive procedures to get into the human body. We're looking at their solutions and ways of enhancing our drilling activities. So as you can see, we're an energy company, but we're not shy to look at companies beyond our domain of expertise or sector and search for technologies that can hold the promise of the future. We're using Aramco Ventures as a vehicle to disrupt ourselves, in addition to the research and development centers that we have all over the world. So that's an example of one company that is shaping the future of Aramco using the best brains and innovation that around the company in various sectors. The VC size is $7 billion. $1 billion is dedicated for sustainability technology. And we're also looking at disruptive technologies in fintech and medtech and elsewhere. The other company is Aramco Digital, and this is a vehicle for us to deliver on our AI ambition. And when it comes to AI, we're not talking about an ambition only. We have identified around 300 use cases that will change the way Aramco does its business, whether it's in tapping into 9 decades of seismic data that can help us enhance our recovery of oil and gas, or when it comes to something as challenging as corrosion in our industry. We invest a lot in anti-corrosion, and we believe through AI we'll be able to reduce a lot of the cost on the industry. I've seen an estimate around $3 trillion are spent annually on anti-corrosion. Now imagine the possibility of the solutions that AI can bring about, not only in oil and gas business, but even for municipalities. If you know that many of the water that goes in the pipeline leaks because of corrosion or valves. The other aspect is predicting failure of equipment. Reliability is a big imperative in a company like Aramco. We want to make sure that the energy that people need is readily available. AI is helping us anticipate failure of major equipment before they fail. At the moment, we look at pressure and temperature of some of these equipment. Soon, we will be augmenting the sound of these equipments, and we will be tapping into a backlog of data that can improve our accuracy in forecasting failure for some of these equipment before they happen, by which we reduce the interruption costs on the company. We're really excited by technology and AI specifically. We believe that's a reality more than just a far-fetched ambition. And with AI, we're taking a unique approach by educating the frontliners who are the users of AI on the possibility of AI and what can it offer them, and then matching them with the data analysts who understand the technology and know how to go by in helping them adapt and use some of these technologies. I think the next 2 years will see a huge opportunities and disruption that come about by AI. Companies that are mature and have their data architecture at the right place while having access to chip and the developed workforce that can help take these use cases into reality stand to benefit greatly, not only for themselves, but even for the industry and their customers.
I love the open-mindedness and the cross-pollination of industries to come up with solutions. Very interesting. So Roger, given that we're seeing a very unprecedented demand right now in projections because of the proliferation of AI and data centers, both in the United States and around the world, how is GE Vernova approaching all of these challenges, and what opportunities do you see ahead to help move innovation forward for you?
Well, certainly, data centers, AI is the space race of our generation, and you can't talk about data centers without talking about the electricity to provide them, to enable them to work. And if you think of artificial intelligence as not only a competitiveness issue, but a security issue, having access to the energy to enable the data centers and the artificial intelligence to do the work is just as important. So it's probably not a surprise, and it's been well documented that we're partnering with all the hyperscalers when it comes to taking a holistic view of how do you align energy, access to energy, with access to data centers while serving all our other needs of energy access as well as decarbonization. So when we think about the challenge of data centers, we kind of think of it with 4 lenses. And the first is dispatchable power. You need dispatchable power now, and you need as much dispatchable power as possible. And so what we're doing there is we're investing in our supply chain. So we've announced, I think, a $9 billion investment through 2028 for our supply chain. This year we've announced $600 million in the US. Take one of our factories alone, Greenville, South Carolina, where we very proudly produce the world's most efficient gas turbines. We've invested $300 million there, about 1,500 jobs that basically double the capacity over about 24 months from 2025 to 2026, so we can meet the demand for dispatchable energy, both for data centers as well as for the other things I talked about earlier. We can talk about small modular reactors. I know that was a focus of the last panel. I'll come back to that in a second, please, but that's also nuclear increasingly a source of dispatchable power. The second is kind of how do you invest in the grid itself and electrification. I mentioned the Middle East and the president's recent trip there, which I had the opportunity to join in Saudi Arabia. I thought they made a very strategic investment in some of our equipment, not only for gas turbines, but for something we call synchronous condensers. And if that's not something that rolls off the tongue, it's critical to how do you turn renewable energy into acting more like dispatchable energy? How do you make renewable energy put inertia onto the grid? So I thought Saudi was being very strategic and saying we're not only going to invest in gas, but to meet our Vision 2030 goals and be competitive with data centers, we're going to invest in this grid technology. Meanwhile, the UAE is investing in SMRs. And so you see how the investment in the grid itself is just as an important backbone. It's the central nervous system to making data centers work. The third is behind the meter, and how are we watching policies where FERC and other agencies allow hyperscalers to provide energy behind the meter and connect that. I think we're in the early days of that, but that's something that certainly can be very complementary to providing power for AI and data centers. And the fourth is innovation, and I appreciate the comments on innovation. This can be an opportunity to drive innovation, small modular reactors. We look at the European Union, the UAE, the great work that Synthos and Poland's doing to have the EU lead in small modular reactors, the work in Canada, here in the US, all of that tied to data centers to some extent, but carbon capture, hydrogen, and more integration of renewables. So, and then ultimately you look at AI, how do you solve for sustainability? How do you solve for net zero? I think the next step of the equation.
Very, very much. Clay, I'm going to go back to you on this one, and sort of given the little bit of the same question, but how is Devon positioned to help meet the surge across the United States, and what's the role of conventional energy sources in meeting those new targets and supply?
Yeah, I appreciate Roger's comments. I'd say kind of our perspective on that, I think about the challenge caused by AI and the solutions presented by AI, and there's a bit of a circular reference. You think about, wow, we're going to need so much energy to supply AI, but you think, how do we do that? Well, we use AI and leverage the amazing attributes of AI to provide that. Then I think about the circular reference of, wow, what we really need is a build out of infrastructure. And okay, to supply the energy. Well, guess what? The build out of infrastructure requires an incredible amount of energy to actually be able to accomplish that. So there's a really interesting circular reference. We are all of above the policies. We're mainly oil and gas production. We have an investment in geothermal as well. We're supportive of thinking about, this holistic, I love the title, this is the Atlantic Conference Global Energy Forum, so it's very global and it's very holistic from an energy standpoint. Our own piece of the equation, we think about that balance of reliability, affordability, and doing things the right way, and I think we're well on our way to achieving that.
Fahad, what does the energy transition look like for Aramco, and how does it shape your approach to the energy trilemma?
Well, if you look at the current energy system today, it's around 325 million barrels of oil equivalent. This is comprised of coal, oil, gas, nuclear, and renewables. Fossil fuels are around 80% of that system. And if you go back to 1990, the same percentage was 80%, despite the growth we have seen in that energy system. We believe that much of the growth and the energy transition going forward will be coming and driven by the Global South. And the true understanding of demand and the importance of affordability is key. If you look at the per capita consumption of the Global South versus the Global North today, you will see the disparity between that, and you'll see the opportunity for much more demand for energy. A lot of people think oil and gas is limited to mobility, but petrochemicals and materials is a huge demand center for oil and gas. And at the moment, there are hardly any feedstock that can replace the role of oil and gas and petrochemicals. And if you look at the per capita consumption of materials or petrochemicals, the gap between the Global South and North is even bigger. Emissions are borderless, and it is important for us to look at the growth centers, the demand centers, and try to address the sources of some of these emissions. The other aspect of this is just to show you how people sometimes underappreciate the demand in energy. I remember in 1987, people were expecting coal to peak. And since then, we have had 5 estimates or more of peaking coal. And up until today, coal seems to be growing despite the alternative fuels to it. This gives you a sense of magnitude of how important is energy security and affordability for many nations and customers. For us, given how big we are when it comes to oil, we produce 1 in every 8 barrels of oil globally. We always look at the reliability of the energy system very closely. And to us, as this global system evolves from being a predominantly molecule system into an electron system, the stability of that system is important, whether it's the grid or the interplay between different fuel mixes. And I believe that the world will have to evolve from a governance point of view to ensure that what we have to oversee the current energy system today adapts to evolving energy system as the world transition into their energy system.
There's going to be a lot of evolution very quickly, quicker than most of us ever thought possible during our lifetimes, which is very exciting, I think. Clay, as a US-based independent producer, how is Devon approaching production in light of the emerging energy dominance priorities? And what does this mean for energy supply in the United States?
Yeah, again, I appreciate the question being energy, because when we think about the constituents of what we produce, we don't see the incremental call for oil from the U.S. producers. So from an investor standpoint, we're a publicly traded company here in the U.S., and our investors are really calling on us to remain in a maintenance capital mode, basically generating, we produce about 385,000 barrels of oil a day, keep that relatively flat, really evaluating and critiquing us on the depth of the portfolio, how long can we continue to do that, the profitability, how much value can we extract, the efficiency, and those pieces. We also produce a tremendous amount of natural gas and NGLs. As he pointed out, the feedstock requirements and what we are able to do as a society with those, that continues to grow. And so we're very pleased to be part of that feedstock as well. When I think about going forward and we think about how do we provide the growing demand for energy overall, it does come into different regions, and then we think about the different components. I think overall, our plans forward remain to hold the line on oil production. We will continue to grow a little bit on the gas and the NGLs because we see an increased demand for it.
Kara, what do you see as the connection between net zero and net growth? Can you kind of jump into Goldman Sachs' role in that and facilitating those two pieces in technology and innovation?
Yeah, look, I'd sort of echo what Clay said a bit at the start in terms of my response, which is, right, we're in and to connect to what Roger said, we're in an era, right, of energy growth and abundance, right? At the start, I talked about what we see within our client base and where we see a lot of activity in the power sector, the connection between power and technology companies. Policy plays a very important role and has always played a really important role in the energy complex. And so as a financial institution, right, sort of policy governments focus on being able to balance all of these different objectives. How do you ensure reliable energy? How do you ensure affordability of energy, sustainability of energy supply, kind of doing things in the right way, to Clay's point? As a financial institution, and at Goldman Sachs specifically, where kind of our opportunity and the role that we play is really working with clients on the back of that. And so, as I mentioned at the top, we have clients across the spectrum. We have clients, doubling down on decarbonization strategies, and we have clients doubling down on kind of current production, and it really spans the gamut. I think what's really critical here is if we take a kind of longer-term look back, take a step back, and we look at the commercial viability and economics, which is where I tend to spend a lot of time with clients on this topic, we know that it's kind of two different stories, two different things happening. We have, on one hand, we have solar in many parts of the world is cheapest form of energy today. If you look at new electricity that was generated in 2024, 80% of that came from low, zero carbon sources, nuclear being a very dominant part of that, and renewables as well. And so the commercial viability and economics have actually come down significantly. That said, here's the other side of the story. Our research shows that if you look at kind of the full picture of what's needed to really decarbonize economies in line with global goals, more than 50% of those technologies are not yet at commercial scale. So I'm talking about sustainable aviation fuel, I'm talking about hydrogen, and lots of other areas. And so for us at Goldman Sachs, given that backdrop, what we really need to respond to is where the client demand is. And what we see as an opportunity, certainly via policy, but also via de-risking and things like structured finance solutions, where we can work with clients to figure out ways that we can help to reduce those risk profiles. But I do think this link between kind of policy and finance is really, really important. There may be things today that we can't finance, where there is limited growth, to get to your question on net zero lower emissions, just may not be financeable today. And in 10 years it may be or it may not, but that is, that's how important the energy system is. It's really heavily linked to these objectives of growth, and we have to figure out how to navigate within that based on what our clients' needs and preferences are.
Roger, similar question for you. How do you ensure that we promote economic growth and energy management and efficient strategies for you and your company?
Well, I feel super optimistic about this, and I think the numbers speak for themselves. And for someone like me, I think we've all, if you're in this room, you've been in this space for some time, and maybe we come at this from different angles, and we have different ways of getting there. But I think one thing perhaps we'd all agree on is if we're going to succeed for the theme of this panel, net growth, net zero, we need investments at scale. It's not going to happen on its own. We have to invest or it's not going to happen. And so for people like me, we've been saying for years and decades, we need investments at scale. We need investments at scale. Well, the good news is, one thing we all agree on, those investments at scale are here. They're coming, they're here, and they're happening for the foreseeable future. And what we look at is how, as a company, do we translate this electrification era to other benefits for net zero, for decarbonization, for sustainability, for prosperity, and things like that. And we see a direct correlation there that you can do both. And this is why I have this theme of optimism. And I'm just going to share some numbers. So I shared a couple goals. We have 150 gigawatts of capacity online by 2030 that we're going to contribute. At least 30% of that in emerging economies, 30,000 students we're going to reach out to. Well, last year we just produced this morning our 2024 performance. So we put 31 gigawatts of capacity onto the grid globally in 2024. That's about the size of the state of Virginia, the data center capital of the world. That's just a coincidence. We didn't actually do that on purpose, but it turns out the numbers work out that way. And we energized about 71 gigawatts of transformers in the world. That's about the size of the grid of South Africa. So that's a pretty significant impact by one company onto the global grid. How does that impact greenhouse gas emissions? So by making those investments at scale, we avoided 37 million metric tons of carbon dioxide emissions. The carbon intensity of that 37 gigawatts of capacity the size of Virginia, that carbon intensity is 20% below the carbon intensity of the grid as a whole. So the more we're making these investments at scale, the more we're improving the trajectory of greenhouse gas emissions, climate change emissions, plus we're creating workforce development, we're creating jobs, we're increasing prosperity, access. Our 30% goal, emerging and developing economies, we beat that in our first year, around 43%. Now, we may not do that well next year, but you get the point. So we're helping deliver access to people who are underserved by affordable, reliable, sustainable electricity. So that's why we feel really optimistic about the future, because these investments at scale we've been needed are coming. They're being led by electrification, they're being led by energy security, data centers, competitiveness, but they're being aligned to these other benefits that are just as important. And so we're trying to connect those dots very intentionally.
So one last quick question for each of you, just rapid fire, because I have children. If my children were going to go into the global energy sector in 30 years, what should they be reading about, learning, or becoming familiar with today? Who wants to take this first?
Should I go? And I think your children, our children, like most of what leaders face today, they'll have to be able to connect different sectors together. I think the days of going into super specialization or limited verticals are gone. A lot of the knowledge today is getting intertwined, and the ability of young kids and executives to be able to jump from one knowledge domain to the other and connect different dots between different domains will differentiate individuals and leaders alike. We're living in a world that is getting much more complex, and the ability to see through that complexity and break it down into something that's chewable and understandable will pay off greatly for us today and for our future generations.
Thank you.
Yeah, I have two boys. I talk to them quite a bit about thinking of their futures. They're kind of college age, young adults, and what I press on them is being well grounded in the fundamental laws of physics, the fundamental laws of economics, capitalism's virtues, and what it can really become. I think they have a better than most understanding of energy because they live in the same house as me, so they've gotten that beat into their head over the years. But I am an incredible optimist when it comes to AI, and I think it's such an equalizer to the great society, the planet that we live in. And I think the beautiful thing, unlike so many other technologies, the best teacher of AI is AI. The best onboarder is AI. And so the barrier to entry of really making the most of this incredible new technologies, the industrial revolution that we're living today, there is a conveyor belt leading you right to it. You just have to step on. So that'd be my advice to them and to others trying to think about the next 30, 40 years.
Kara?
So I have 4 kids, ages 9 to baby. So I don't talk to them about physics yet. Hopefully that comes in the future. I just try to make things really tangible for them. And actually, as someone who, leads a team focused on sustainable finance at Goldman Sachs, I find it super important to talk about things in really plain English terms. Sometimes with kids, but even with adults. For example, if I'm talking to an investor who's very focused on this topic, I'll say, what about soccer balls, right? Soccer balls, we need a ton of energy to be able to make a soccer ball, and I say this to my son. So just kind of understanding, and they see the sun, they understand solar energy really clearly, but actually understanding what it takes to produce all these things that you love, that are tangible, I think is really important. So we have a lot of books about how things are made. I do think energy, this connection between energy and economic growth is only going to become stronger for them as time goes on. And so helping them to really understand what that means, I think, is critical.
I have four children too, and thank you for asking the question. And so my 21-year-old's interning in Washington this summer on electrification software to make the grid stronger. And so about half an hour before I walked over here, I'm like, you need to come over to Land Council. I yanked him away, and Land Council's been very generous, and I think found a chair for him in the back to kind of learn from this group. But I'd say two things. One is I'll repeat the word optimism. We do worry, and this is why we're unapologetically optimistic, unrelentlessly optimistic, is we don't think the youth are exposed to a lot of optimistic messages about the future, and that weighs on us because we do think there's an opportunity to define your entire career the next decades to come in being part of the solution. This is such an exciting time for all the reasons we talked about. We're at the cusp of a new era from your first question. And while I get to see a little bit of that and hopefully set up some folks for success, it's really the next generation that's going to deliver on that. So we think there's a lot to be optimistic about, and we want to be very unrelentlessly optimistic in communicating directly to youth. And the second to that point is I ask the youth to challenge us to do better and how we can better serve your success. And one of the things we did, I'm going to go back to the last reference to our sustainability report we came out with 9:30 this morning. When you flip the front page or when you go to our website, we did something entirely different. We're speaking directly to the youth, and we decided the youth don't communicate the way I do. I learn by reading, my kids learn by watching TikTok and YouTube and things like that. And so we fundamentally changed the front of our report on our website. We had youth design it to speak in a language. We got to the same messages, but to speak in a way that, frankly, I don't, and communicate in a way that I don't, so that we can be kind of this beacon of optimism and not only just send a message, but send it in a way that resonates better with the way the next generation thinks about things. So this is, I think, very important for us to be invested in and committed to. So thank you for inspiring us with that question.
Thank all of you for being on this panel and enlightening us with some really interesting ideas and your thoughts and what you're working on. I really appreciate it, and appreciate everybody being here to listen in, and I invite you all to enjoy lunch.